You're listening to the Unwritable Rant podcast with your host, author, and occasional misanthrope, Juliette Miranda. Go to theunwritablerant.com and you can subscribe on iTunes or connect with the show on Facebook and Twitter.
Hey there, y'all. It's Juliette Miranda. Welcome to episode number 88 of the Unwritable Rant podcast. It is drinking time, y'all. So what do you say? Grab a glass, fill it up with something that you love, raise it up, and let's toast. Cheers, y'all. Oh, my. Today, I am drinking Barrell Bourbon Batch number 11. This is the same bourbon that I talked about in my bourbon sippin' video a while back. And it was so delicious, I had to talk about it with y'all here. Because this is truly a spectacular bourbon. It's a small batch bourbon that was aged for 6 years. And it has a mash bill of 70% corn, 25% rye, and 5% malted barley. It's cask strength, so it's really, really high proof. This is at 114 proof, so it's strong, but it is outstanding. And what's crazy about this bourbon is that despite how high the proof is, it is so drinkable, so delicious, it tastes like a summer day. And that's why I'm drinking it, because I could use a little bit of sunshine right now. And this bourbon, and this is going to sound ridiculous, it reminds me of a carnival or a state fair. And here's why. It has this incredible sort of pecan flavor to it. Roll it around in your mouth a little bit, and you're going to taste, I swear to God, popcorn. And then it finishes out with this wonderful sort of cherry flavor. And when it all comes together, it is magical. I'm drinking mine with a little bit of water, which is what I do when you've got a really high-proof bourbon like this. I love it. I will say this bottle is a little rare. I think it might actually be out of production now because it's a very small batch. But if you happen to catch it, grab it. So I've been doing a little bit of thinking these days, y'all. And I've realized that of all of the skills in the world that I am lacking, my ability to decorate is kind of high on the list. Somehow it's just a skill or a trait that I never managed to pick up. Quite honestly, my idea of decorating our townhome involves a lot of empty bourbon bottles and flowers that I'll steal from our neighbor's yard. I tend to leave most of the decorating up to my guy. He's got a better eye for it than I do. But also, in being my guy, and just a guy in general, it means that our townhouse hasn't changed very much in the 10 years that we've lived here. Oh, sure, we've added a couple of new pieces of furniture and some new artwork on the walls here and there. But for the most part, it is almost identical to the way it was the day we moved in. Now, normally this isn't such a big deal. We spend so much time traveling and on the road that, quite honestly, fixing up our place is kind of low on our list of priorities. But every so often, I get that itch. I get twitchy, particularly when my guy is on the road solo. And this is exactly what happened to me not too long ago, and I suppose this is how all of my worst stories start. I was alone, I was bored, and I'd been drinking. Really, though, my day had kind of come to an end. I didn't have any projects to work on, I didn't feel like cooking, and it was too chilly to head on outside. So I stood there in the center of our living room surveying my situation, wondering why there weren't palm trees outside of my window, and I decided that if I couldn't change my exterior, I was going to change the interior. And so for the next 4 hours, I proceeded to entirely rearrange our living room. Now, it's said that in times of incredible stress, people develop sort of superhuman-like powers. And this explains how women are able to, say, lift a car off of a child. And I truly believe that this is what happened to me. Because somehow, all on my own, I was able to relocate a couch, a coffee table, a bookshelf, and an entire entertainment center. Mind you, I did manage to rip up a patch of carpeting and take out a chunk of our wall, but it didn't matter because I was so thrilled with the results. The room looked remarkably open. It was inviting, and it showcased our couch, which I love. This is a gorgeous couch. It's so comfortable, and it really made it the focal point. So I was excited beyond belief, and I couldn't wait for my guy to get home and see what I'd done. Of course, when he got home and surveyed the room, he didn't quite have the reaction that I had hoped for. My guy kind of stood in the center of the room the same way I had, only he started shuffling around a little bit. And he kind of resembled my cat when we introduced her to a new litter box. He just looked uncomfortable, unnatural, and vaguely terrified. I knew what he was going to say, and I didn't want to hear it. I loved what I had done to the room. I was incredibly proud of myself, and I wanted it to stay that way. So I look at him and I go, "Baby, just give it a couple of days. If you still hate it, I promise we will put it back to the way it was." That kind of made his eyebrows go up a little bit, and he looks at me and he says, "We?" Well, duh, yes, we. Rearranging furniture under duress is always a we event. Well, he agreed to my conditions, but he wasn't happy about it. And for 2 days, he kind of sulked. Every time he would reach for the coffee table that was in an entirely different position, he'd look at me and say, "I don't like this." Every time he had to turn to face the TV in a different direction, he'd look at me and say, "I don't like this." Even the location of the bookshelf prompted a, "I don't like it." I was getting a little dismayed, I admit. But come the third night, we're situated on the couch, we've got a couple of glasses of bourbon, it's raining outside, we're cozy. And I hadn't yet heard those 3 little words. So I'm thinking I'm in the clear. I'm thinking my living room is going to stay. Of course, my comfort violated Murphy's Law, because the second I felt good about it, we were interrupted by a drop of water falling on my guy's head. It didn't take too long to figure out where it came from. The window, which was located directly behind the couch now, was leaking on us. My guy gives me a look. I know the look so very well, y'all. It was the look that says, "This is all your fault." Admittedly, he couldn't blame me for the leak, but he could absolutely blame me for our proximity to it. So I immediately go on damage control. And at first, it's kind of a cute little adventure. I grab a glass from the kitchen, position it on the windowsill, and think that all is going to be fine. And it was for a couple of minutes, until the storm kicked in a little bit more, and all of a sudden that one leak turned into 5. And within half an hour or so, I was refilling all 5 of those glasses I had up there every 10 minutes. My guy and I are both getting incredibly annoyed with the situation. And he says, "Unless you've got an arc that I don't know about hidden somewhere in this house, we're going to have to change things up." And of course, by change things up, he didn't mean fix the leak. He meant return the living room back to its original arrangement. I had to admit he had a point, but I wasn't ready to concede defeat just yet. I knew there had to be a better way to contain our leaky window. And it's right about that time when my guy gets a phone call that he has to take. So he disappears into his study and he leaves me alone in the room to fix our leaky window, which was his first mistake. So I'm staring at that window, I'm cursing at it, and I'm thinking there's gotta be a better way. And then, light bulb. I knew what it was. Rather than trying to capture the water, I realized that we could actually funnel the water back outside. So I grabbed myself a garbage bag and some tape. Unfortunately, I couldn't find the duct tape. We were out of gaffer's tape, and that left me with Scotch tape. But I figured if I used enough of it, I could secure that garbage bag to the wall above the window. So I used up about most of the roll, draped the garbage bag down, and then pulled the window out so that I could thread the bag outside. See, that's how our windows work. They lift up, and you can pull them out. So I've got it all situated, and then I try to place the window back in its track. Our windows aren't exactly the highest quality windows, so I kind of had to jam it in there a little bit, but I was confident. I rattled it around a little bit, it seemed perfectly secure, and what do you know? All that water was just sliding down the garbage bag and right back outside. I am quite pleased with myself. So I shut the blinds, I pour us a couple more glasses of bourbon, And when my guy comes back out of his study and asks me about the leak, I did my best Dumb and Dumber impression, looked at him and said, "I took care of it," which I totally had. And for an hour, it was beautiful. My guy was even starting to relax a little bit. He wasn't hearing that obnoxious drip, drip, drip sound anymore. We were comfortable, we were cozy. That's when everything went to hell. Apparently, there was a tornado a couple of towns over, and our town was getting all of the residual wind. Of course, what alerted us to the fact that there was a tornado a few towns over was the fact that the window blew in and cracked me on the head. And in the process, the garbage bag that I had oh so safely secured to the top of the ceiling came barreling down with it, and somehow got caught in this magical gust of wind that took that wet garbage bag, which, by the way, is coated in rusty, leaky water, and wraps it around my guy's face like some sort of possessed slip and slide. My guy was drenched. The couch was drenched because when the window blew in, it blew in a whole lot of rainwater with it. I had a massive lump on the back of my head. And my guy didn't say a single goddamn word. He didn't have to. I was 2 steps ahead of him. I just headed to the other end of the couch, grabbed an arm, and got ready to move that thing back to where it originally started from. Now, fast forward 2 days. We're back in our living room, which is back to its original arrangement, and we're joined by our resident handyman. He's looking at the window and checking things out, and he says, "Hey, guys, do you mind if I go and check your bedroom window?" So we lead him upstairs. He puts his hands on his hips, and he goes, "Yep, it's exactly what I thought." Well, it turns out I had left that window open. Just a little bit, just a crack, just enough so that the sill was constantly filling up with water during that massive storm. And as the handyman explained, that water had to go somewhere. So it filtered down, right down to the window that was directly below it, the window that just happened to be in front of our couch. And at that exact moment, I realized that I could be sitting on my couch in the position that I loved, surveying my lovely, reorganized room, if only I had remembered to close the goddamn bedroom window. Ugh. And of course, the grand conclusion of all of this is the understanding that once again, all of the drama in our household is entirely my fault. And now, if you will excuse me, I'm going to drink a little bit more bourbon because clearly that is the one thing I'm capable of doing and not screwing up. Hang on, y'all. Oh, that is so good. If I can deflect a little bit of the blame, I have to say that I learned all of my home destruction skills from my family. Because there is no one better at destruction than my dad. As a kid, I grew accustomed to my mother's shrill cry whenever she would discover the latest disaster courtesy of my dad. Now, sometimes that damage would be minimal. It'd be, say, something like a mailbox that my dad had taken out when testing the nitrous oxide boost he had installed in his charger. More often, though, the damage was far more expansive, like the time he nearly burned the house down. My dad is a physicist. He specializes in high-energy physics the same way other men may specialize in covert military strategy or, arms dealing. That is to say, his interest runs deep and occasionally illicit. I can remember coming home late at night from ballet class or dates and finding the basement windows of our house lit up with an eerie purple glow. That'd be my dad. He'd be down there, sometimes till dawn, building and testing his vacuum tube Tesla coils. And that purple color, that was the lightning bolts he was generating. You have to understand that the Tesla coils my dad builds aren't those cute novelty ones that you can buy, where the currents are contained in a fancy glass covering. Nope, the Tesla coils my dad makes are a good 4 or 5 feet high and generate lightning bolts even longer. Of course, my dad doesn't call them lightning bolts. To him, they're high-current plasma channels or forked streamers. But to me, they will always be lightning. And I've grown so accustomed to seeing these bolts shoot towards my head, that during thunderstorms you can typically find me on the driveway, taunting the sky with metal forks. I doubt that any natural bolt of lightning could ever be as wild or unruly as what my dad makes. So, a while back, I was hanging out with him in the basement, which is something of an intimidating place. Half of it is dedicated to his machine shop, which he created when he realized that the parts that he needed for his experiments didn't actually exist. He makes all sorts of crazy things for his lab, and what he doesn't use, he sells on a somewhat questionable website that he built. And this, I'm sure, is exactly what explains all the black helicopters that circle over their house. The rest of the basement is his high-voltage lab. And on this particular day, my dad was testing his latest Tesla coil project. I'm not entirely sure what the goal of his testing was, but it consisted mainly of my dad cranking up the wattage on the coil to see how big of a spark he could generate. I couldn't tell you what prompted me to join him for this display, because most of my family avoids that basement on general principle. You see, my dad, while being astoundingly brilliant, is also kind of bumbling, for lack of a better word. And believe me, I don't mean any offense to him. This is just a characteristic that I see in all of the scientists I've met. And it's perpetuated in pop culture, especially through shows like Big Bang Theory. Somehow, it just seems that the smarter these guys get, the less practical they are. Like my dad, for example, who is currently generating so much current in the basement that my hair was literally standing on end. Fluorescent tubes from across the room were illuminating, and my dad was at the helm. Each time he'd crank the dial up on his master control, he'd mutter something about pulse rate, and then watch as the arc of his lightning would blast longer and longer. I'll tell you, the noise in the room was staggering. I mean, just imagine the sound that lightning makes on its own when it connects with something, whether it's the ground or a tree. Now imagine the sound that lightning would make concentrated in a single small room, connecting with, say, something like, I don't know, the ceiling. Now, the way my dad operates on a regular basis is kind of distracted. And none of us know exactly what goes on in his head, whether it's analysis or voices. But he's not a fool. So a long time ago, he installed a ground plate on the ceiling above his coil. But as my dad explained to me after the fact, high voltage often reacts in different ways than the model predicts. It seems like a sound explanation, except that I have a sneaking suspicion my dad had tossed that model right out of the window. He was just gleefully cranking up the Tesla coil under the whim of more electricity, more plasma channels, more noise. And I had to admit, it was spectacular. Terrifying, but spectacular. And I'm fairly certain through all of the madness, I heard my dad humming the national anthem in the background. But then, one of those streamers went a little crazy. It forked to the left and connected with the wood paneling of the ceiling across the room. My dad switched off the machine and stood staring. His eyes were glazed over with excitement, and he was clearly focusing on the wrong thing. "Did you see that?" he yelled. "That's the biggest arc yet." Oh, I saw it all right. I also now saw that the wood it zapped was on fire. But my dad being my dad, the reality of a ceiling fire was completely lost on him, and he was busy running through the entire event on replay in his head and making mental calculations on how to replicate it. It took my mother yelling from the top of the stairs to snap him out of his trance. She's always had something of a sixth sense about these sort of things, and our sudden silence was likely and rightfully very alarming to her. And that's when my dad looked at the flaming ceiling, sucked in his breath, and said, "Don't tell your mother." "Oh, okay, Dad, I won't." In all of my years, I've gotten fairly adept at concealing things from my mom. A broken vase, stained upholstery. She's a smart lady, though. And I guessed she'd kind of put two and two together when her entire house burned to the ground. Fortunately, my dad woke up, came to his senses, and had a fire extinguisher at the ready. A homemade one, mind you. but he was able to douse the flames before they could overtake the room. The next day, my mother found him replacing the entire lab ceiling with grounding plates. She never did learn what prompted him to do that, but I can say that every time my dad now heads down to the basement, that is our cue to head out of the house. And with that, I'm lifting up my bourbon and toasting to my dad and all of the other mad scientists of the world. Y'all certainly keep things interesting. Oh, bourbon. Well, that's enough out of me, folks. Thanks so much for listening to the Unwritable Rant podcast. If you are so inclined, head on over to snugcomics.com. There you will find Kindred Homecomings, a comic book that stars me and actress Jamie Bernadette. The two of us go on a very cool monster hunt, and I cannot wait for all of you to see this comic. Now, this issue is just part 1. The comic book is a series. And as I mentioned last week, if you want to be a character in the next edition of the comic book, I've got a way for you to do that. All of the details for the contest are going to be posted on my Twitter page on Friday, May 12th. So make sure you head on over to my Twitter page, which is @morningneurosis, on Friday, May 12th to learn how you can be a part of the next issue of the comic book. And now, y'all, I'm out of here. Have a great week. I'll be back to chat with you again next. Cheers, y'all.
Go to theunwritablерant.com and sign up to get early access to interviews and new videos. You can hear new episodes of The Unwritable Rant on radiovegas.rocks every Tuesday at 4 p.m. Eastern and on IPMNation.com on Saturdays and Sundays at 6 p.m. Eastern, and hear best of episodes every weekday at 3 p.m. Eastern. And don't forget to connect with Juliette on Twitter @morningneurosis.
Girl, you was pretty as a Sunday morning, standing on the corner at Carondelet. What you say we make our way up to Bourbon, couple hurricanes and a hand grenade, and get blown away. Let the chips fall where they may. If it's all the same, what you say, bon ton, hey, pretty mama, I can smell the gumbo. Sweet as taste of honeysuckle on my lips. Good God Almighty, I can hear the trombone. Every heart ought to beat to a rhythm like this. Come a little closer, honey, let me hold you. Nothing tastes better than a bourbon kiss. You can be the flower on my magnolia. Every heart ought to beat to a rhythm.